There are a lot of specifications in cameras which people don't seem to understand too well. I'm not saying that I understand everything, but I've been doing this for almost 30 years. So let's talk about it. We ask about what is the resolution of the camera. Are you using CCD, CMOS? Is it 3 CCD? Is it 3-chip camera? How many images do you have? How many pixels do you have? What's the sensitivity of this camera? Does it have a good dynamic range? What is the dynamic range? So how significant are these numbers? It's like my car is 8 cylinders. Does that make it a better car than your car that has 6 or 4? Not necessarily. It's what the overall, how they get together is what counts. At Vario, we designed the HD18 camera to optimize the best price and benefit. So you can be assured that the cost-benefit ratio here is the best you will find out there. That's why we put high definition and standard definition capabilities. We have a CCD sensor. We have a iris control. We control manually or automatically. We can adjust gamma to compensate for lighting. We provide an excellent dynamic range and very low flare. What is all this? Let's look at these 3 pictures we have here. The picture on your left, it's a highly overexposed. There's almost no detail in the window. And the one in the middle is very bluish. And the one on the right, you can barely see the person. So this is a combination of what I said in my previous session, which is lighting, camera. Is it the lighting, is it the camera, or is it both? Again, the answer is both. Both go hand in hand. The one on the left obviously lacks enough dynamic range. So not only the lighting is incorrect, but the camera does not have enough dynamic range. In the second picture, the white balance is not set correctly, which means the color temperature of the light source is probably too high for the camera setting. And the last one on the right, no dynamic range on that camera is causing this situation. So let's explore another picture we have here. This scene seems to be a very, very high resolution. But this high resolution to your eye, when measured, doesn't seem to be that high. So what is it? What is making this picture good? Is it the camera or is it the light? This time I'm going to say the light is probably more to do than the camera. Why is this? The human eye perceives detail in 2 ways. One is the separation of 2 objects, and the other is the contrast. And many times, contrast gives you the illusion of higher or crisp images, while the image is not so crisp. And manufacturers kind of play with this, you know, they give you a higher contrast camera or a higher contrast TV set, and you think, oh, this is a real sharp picture, when it really is not. If you look at what I'm showing here, the upper portion and the lower portion have exactly the same resolution, but the contrast ratio on the upper portion and the lower portion is significantly different. And you would say, hey, you know, the upper portion has more resolution than the lower portion, and that is not true. Here we have a more detailed information, and you can see different contrast ratios and resolution. And the resolution chart is exactly the same setting. So when you go from top down, you will think that the top, who has the highest contrast ratio, is the crisper picture. And that is true in how we perceive it. So don't get fooled by a resolution specification. A camera has 800 lines, 1,000 lines, or whatever, when the contrast ratio is not there. So you have many, many millions of pixels. When the system cannot manage contrast, you will not get what is perceived as a sharp picture. The next thing we need to deal with is with lens problems. Lens is a very important portion of the camera, and it's where the light passes from the outside to the inside and to the front of the imager. So you can only think on how important this piece of glass is. In this picture, we see something strange, which is this reflection inside the camera. Although it may look good if you do it on purpose, it may not look good if this is at a special place. So depends on the mood what you want to give. This may not be proper, and you may end up with it. And how do we prevent it? The other phenomenon you will run into is what we call ghosts, which are reflections inside the lens due to improper lighting. Again, if you're making a science fiction movie, this might be proper. But if you're shooting something that is not supposed to have this, you may not want it. The other phenomenon we find when improper lighting and or incorrect camera is what we call chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration occurs because the light at that intensity, when faced with a big step in contrast, the different focal length of the red, green, and blue become visible as a line adjacent to the object. So the lens flare is a reflection, like you see here in the red lines, from the outer glasses to the inner glasses. And this will create the ghosts in the other reflections like streaks and so on. If you're going to be shooting in lighting conditions which are challenging, like outdoors against the sun or against a light source or a window, you want to make sure that you're not going to have flare problems. Like here, there is no sun there. It's just a reflection in the lens. If you're shooting outdoors, you may not want this camera to perform the shot. You may want to do two things. Either make sure that you have a camera which has a mechanical iris, or that you use a filter to bring down the amount of light. And as I mentioned, chromatic aberration is a different focal length for red, green, and blue. You want to make sure that your camera has a lens that has a minimum of chromatic aberration. But again, lighting is important. In this picture here, you see a lot of chromatic aberration. Two reasons for this. Number one, the camera focal length or focus has not been properly set. If the focus is not properly set, the focal length for the red, green, and blue ain't not going to match. In addition to that, there is a very bright object against a dark object. So this is going to emphasize the problem. In the next session, we're going to explore even further how imagers perform in different lighting conditions.